You awaken in a mysterious room. You look at your surroundings. It seems to remind you of a certain video game, but you cannot place exactly what kind of game it is. After looking into your surroundings for a bit, you decide to move over to the next room.
Clem, do you remember why we're here?
Your guess is as good as mine, dude.
You take a look to your right, because something's catching your eye. There's a group of people
Oh, God.
gathering for something.
God.
You just remember.
We're gonna stop going to the inn.
You just
That's
teleported
weirder,
here
it's just
from
rough.
the space station for a reason. The reason is you're here for ENDGAME. You run
I
into
thought
the
I could deal
crowd.
with Nomono.
God, I can't believe we forgot. Like,
This is gonna be rough.
do we have to drink all that booze? Headache.
We gotta talk about their problem when we get back to the ship.
Hi, welcome to ENDGAME!
I don't have a problem.
Yeah, you do.
Wait, shh,
Sarah,
you guys, we're
let's
doing a
ride
show
this
back
out
here.
with
You
the
guys can't be
homestead
talking.
enough.
Quiet.
Yeah, hey,
Welcome to
hey.
ENDGAME. We're talking. We always talk about the future of humanity, technology, how optimistic, pessimistic we are, and this week we're talking about role playing. What? Psych?
Nomono, I think you're breaking their role play. I think you're kind of breaking the. You're killing
I'm not in their role playing. Like I'm outside of their rule set. I can do what I want.
We're NPCs.
What does that even mean?
I think
I'm
we're
not an
NPCs
NPC
in
in
our
somebody
game.
else's life. What do you
Yeah.
fucking not know? I'm a human being.
Are you the bartenders? Are you the owners of this establishment?
We're the
Clem and I
hosts
would
of
like
the
a drink.
show, Zircron. All right. So wait, before we get into it, I'm curious. Like, I didn't actually talk to you. Like, have you done D&D or anything, Psych? Have you done any role
Never.
playing?
Oh yeah.
Never?
I've only talked to
Oh.
people who do D&D, but I've never actually done it myself.
Oh.
Is there something that stopped you, or do you just never found the opportunity?
Yeah, I never found the opportunity. I mean, I've seen the D&D room and things like that, but I haven't actually had. I guess I've never been invited to D&D.
Oh no.
Oh.
Sometimes to make it happen, you have to do it yourself. That's what my case was. Like, no one invited me to play, so I created my own game, and I ran a campaign of Ready Player One called Ready Player Two, and it was awesome.
Oh wow.
And we went on like this grand adventure that only took place in our minds, and now we have all these. Oh, go
Well,
ahead.
I never understood D&D. I mean, I guess I'm just starting to understand it, but I guess I think of like board games, and I know it's not a board game, and I think of MMOs, and it's not an MMO. But basically, people are, from my understanding, people are all kind of tacitly agreeing to follow one person's storytelling, and that they can basically, that one person, the dungeon master, can come up with anything, and basically people follow along with it, and it's kind of less of a board game and more of an adventure kind of thing. Or...
One way to think of it might be that the DM, everyone's collaborating in the storytelling, but there is one person who's kind of more in charge, and that is the DM. But instead of being more like he's telling the story, he's really more of the game engine. So the game master, rolls a bunch of dice, decides which enemies are going to be where. Decides what the environment is going to be like and what the quests are going to be and everything. But it's up to the players to determine where they go in that environment. So it's very much a sandboxy type of game if you compare it to video games.
Maybe we should grab one of the people that was playing earlier to like see what. Like Zircron, can you run up here really quick and can you explain kind of role playing to us, or what your take is? I assume we just saw that you're into role playing. So
Well,
wait,
yeah, it's like
should Zircron stay in the middle, or should he come back here?
No, come up here.
Yeah, come up here.
Hey. Okay.
Squeeze in.
So, like, role playing can take on a lot of different meanings, but what a lot of people think of when you hear role playing is when you take the personality of someone else and you pretend to be them, and you act with their personalities, and you just remove yourself from that, and you become a completely different person.
Is that the main draw? Is that why people do it?
Yeah, a lot of people like to have a particular favorite character that they like to play as, or they like to try lots of new different things. So they'll try like different classes and different personalities and see how that rolls with the general campaign. But it's mainly like like how video games are an escape from reality to be someone that you're not.
I wonder if there's any kind of other basics, like something that you're unaware of, Psych, that we need to like set the foundation for role playing in some way. Like, are we going to use any kind of weird vocabulary today? Like, there's a dungeon master. That's the guy who's the person who's narrating. There's players.
Yeah.
What else?
Yeah,
NPCs.
There's in character, there's out of character. Those are important
yeah,
terms.
that would be IC and OOC, but
Wait, I've never used that. I've only ever played in real life, so I've never like. Is that how people play in text form?
Yeah.
In text form, people will normally use the abbreviations, but a lot of people just say out of character. You know, it's like
I guess
in real life it doesn't really matter all that much.
Also, just as a quick poll, like who here has actually role played before? Like thumbs up if you've role played.
Yeah, so
emoji.
be more specific.
I
Like
guess
any
in
role
it-
playing ever? Anything they would define as role playing?
Yeah, anything that you would consider role playing, and I guess if your definition of role playing doesn't come up in these conversations, you know, come tell us about the kind of role playing that you've done and how it might differ from what we've kind of defined so far. But interesting. It seems like most people actually have. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe I have, and I just don't realize it. I mean, I've been in marching band. Like that. Does that count
not
as
role
role
playing.
play?
I
Like,
don't think that
I don't know.
counts, no.
Sorry.
oh,
No,
man.
I think most people are pretty aware of it when they are role playing. I mean, it's a very, very common hobby online. Over the internet is a great medium for it.
Okay. In 5th grade, I was in the Wizard of Oz. I was like the lion in Wizard of Oz. Does that count as role playing?
Well, that's
No.
acting.
That's really
I mean,
yeah.
What about Orbis?
Theater
What's the
is not-
difference?
If you're
Orbis?
acting and you're running a script, you're not role playing. Like
Yeah,
role
it's a
playing, I think
script.
has to be improvised, right? Like it's
Interesting.
you're on
Okay.
the. But yeah, you played Orbis, right? When you were playing Orbis, were you not in character? Did you create a character for yourself, or how did?
Nope.
Or were you just yourself?
That's just me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were
Yeah.
other
And
people
I've
in
done, like,
character?
some people
I didn't-
were. Yeah, I mean,
Were they?
I've done improv. It's interesting because I play trumpet and trombone and do improv jazz, but again, that's like not role playing. So it's interesting that these categories,
I
there's
didn't
like
know
this
you played
kind
the
of
trumpet. That's awesome.
yeah, but I don't know. It's like clear. I don't know. I guess it's like you have to be acting like a character.
Yeah.
Without
the
a
whole point is to
script
be
kind of
someone
thing.
who's not you in the context of a fictional world usually.
But spontaneously, there has to be a spontaneous element. Like it can't be like you can't be acting as a role. It has to be like, I guess that's where the playing part comes in. Is that it's spontaneous. You're just making things up as you go and stuff like that.
Right.
Well, you see,
Yeah.
role playing can include acting, because acting isn't role playing, but role playing is acting. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, that
'Cause-
makes sense.
Because when I play my characters, I take it as an opportunity to like stretch my acting muscles, as it were, and just like pretend that I'm in like this in this adventure, and I just pretend to be this other character, and that in turn is acting. But you don't necessarily need to act to role play because you can just be yourself and take on the personality traits of that person, just keeping in mind on what that character would do and what that character would not do.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
how deep you go into it just kind of depends on your like I mean just kind of the context. Like I was in so I started playing tabletop role playing games in high school, and my first my first scenario was we were all playing evil characters, and I remember that got pretty intense in role playing. Like we would have like conversations with each other and like little scenes where we'd have discussions that were in character. But later on, in other groups that I was with, people talked about the decisions that their characters made, but they didn't actually have in character like scenes or discussions or anything. So it was not.
Hello.
So there's different levels of immersion even with the tabletop games.
Which do you prefer? Do you pretty much, even when you're playing tabletop, you guys pretty much fully immersed? You're always in character, or do you go in and out?
I would say 50-50, because with tabletop games, you still have to stop a moment and then announce what you're doing to the DM, so the DM can like make you make the correct rolls, make you tell you what's going to happen, and then just like give you the consequences of those actions. So in a sense, you have to break your character to make your character do something, because you can't literally do that on a tabletop. I mean, you can do it with your imagination, but no one's a mind reader, so you have to actually say what it is.
Is it like third person? Like you're switching to third person to say, oh, now my character is doing this or something?
Yes, yes.
Hmm.
Is there any other kind of role playing that you've done that you kind of want to talk about? Because we're just talking about tabletop. Like, do you want to get into like Minecraft or anything, or should we save that for like
Yes.
later?
Well, I'm okay to talk about it now. Way back in the days, Poplopo and I were like exploring like Minecraft stuff, and we decided that it would be like a really cool idea if we had like went onto a private server and just sort of like role played like a scenario, would just to be like completely immersed. And as we were looking
Yeah,
for
that was
these
good.
worlds, we were discussing what our characters were, what we did, why we are here, and why we want to come back.
Yeah, it was good because like speaking of sandboxes, Minecraft is so open-ended as a game already that we could like the sky was the limit in terms of what we could come up with for what our characters were doing and why they were like in this in the place that they were at and everything. Like depending on the game environment you're in, that's going to be kind of constrained. Because like I've done role playing in games like World of Warcraft, and it has to kind of fit within the lore of World of Warcraft. But Minecraft
Yeah.
was really open-ended.
Yeah, we could just like create our own world, really. And a great thing about Minecraft was that you start from like the bare bottom and you build yourself up, which was great because we like made a scenario like we were scientists that were cast away by the council onto this obscure planet. And we had to use our integrity to just like build ourselves up to greatness again. And because we were scientists, we were cataloging everything, and we were like discovering new things and sharing our discoveries and building things up. The only reason we stopped was because the server broke down and we couldn't continue.
We couldn't go back to the what we'd already built, and so that was too like we didn't. I guess it would have been
Oh no! So there's no ending.
Because the third stage, we got to the Nether, and we learned a lot of like really weird things, and like we kind of like nearly like died in there in a sense, but upon returning, like I could see that my character could have a lot to reflect on, and there was like a key moment in his character development that could have been developed greatly if we had time to develop it. So we ended it there.
But then the server ended because nobody was. I think we two were the only two people playing on that server, and so I think the server owner just decided to just bag it and not continue the server.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
That's interesting because I feel like I don't know, two things come to mind. One is the emotional experience that you're like pretending to be this other person, but you're still having the emotional experiences of that person. And then it also seems a little bit like a dream. Like the way that you're describing that, it almost reminded me of how when someone describes a dream that they had, the person listening to it is like, what? Kind of, but then it makes sense to the person that was in it because it's like naturally developing in this organic way between the two people kind of thing. So it seems like it's this combination of like it's almost like a lucid dream where you're able to control this fantastical experience and like elicit emotions from another person and get the emotions from the other and like, I don't know. So I don't know if that relates.
No, it's a great thing to compare it to.
I
like that a lot.
That's amazing. Yeah. What was I going to say? No, I lost it.
Oh, sorry,
it's interesting because like it is like a movie or some kind of a story or something, and it's extremely exciting to the people who have taken part in it, right? Like you guys have this backstory that's really exciting, and you could probably go on and talk about it, and no one else is going to give a shit because like we're not there, right? We're not in the dream. We weren't there when things happened.
Fine, okay.
And I think that's the experience of most people. I think most people who have played like an RPG or done some role playing, they will get really excited about what happened, and you try to describe it to people, but you're describing a movie that they can't see, and like they can't experience all the details, and so like it really is extremely personal. It's a story that only you have lived. It's it only lives within your own imagination. So it's
makes
special
it special too.
Yeah.
Did you
I was
think
about to say, Yes, I did. I did remember, and I find that it was the very best kind of role playing because since there was only me and Poplopo, we didn't have to really wait for anyone else. So we had the like full shares of like role playing opportunities, and therefore we were always engaged in something. And
depending on
that's
how
like,
depending on how freeform the role playing is, it can get tricky. Like if you have like in D&D, there's a lot of turn taking. You know, people take turns in battle, especially. But like each person kind of decides in turn what they want to do, and so there's this asynchronicity to it where it becomes I guess a bit more like a board game in that way. But in the kind of role playing we were doing, or like in text-based role playing or forum-based role playing, it's basically, well, forum-based isn't real time, but it's kind of you have more freedom, I guess, to respond and to act.
And doing it in VR was just like, well, it was just like really good. I mean, we could have done it in desktop mode, and that's something I've always wanted to try. But it just so happened that when this opportunity came up, VR was also an option, and I think that's like improved the immersion tenfold.
I think that'll be a big part of this conversation. Like, I think we're going to get to how, like, we're doing this shift from it being entirely in our imaginations to living it and it being fully immersed in it, like, technologically. Chemistry, are you awake? Are you okay?
Uh-oh. Chemistry.
Oh no.
Well, okay, good. Thank God. Can we, Zarni, can we pull up, or Zircron, sorry, can we pull up somebody else from your group? I'm curious what Clem's experience is.
Come on, Clem.
So Clem, can you come up here? Wait, Zircron, stay up here. Stay over here. Just maybe come over here or something.
I'll stand on this side.
So Clem, what I know about you is that your first experience with role playing was in VR, playing, like, simulating a desktop RPG, right?
That's correct. So
so
we have.
Where did you play?
Actually played with him. We played D&D, modified 5th edition. Slight homebrew tweaks to it and stuff.
4E is complicated. 4th edition is very complicated.
I didn't even know there were editions.
Yeah, there's.
I thought it was all made
3,
up.
3.
So are video games. They're all made up. They still have versions.
There's so many D&D books, dude.
The stories are their own thing. However, within the story is, like he said, with the DM being basically the game engine, various editions handle scenarios, interactions, events, and spells differently. So you're actually, I don't have examples because I've only played 5th edition, but the way they handle things is vary between editions. And
I think someone over there has a question. Who was that?
Maybe they're just confused.
Welcome, Purple Hearts.
Hey, Purple Heart. This is Endgame. We're talking about role playing today. You can join in on the discussion, but to do so, step into the middle so we can all hear you, and we'll call you out. Clem, I'm kind of interested in what your journey was like. Because this is your introduction to the game. So and you've been playing it for a while, right? So apparently you're hooked.
Oh yeah, I'm hooked.
Hooked is one way to describe it.
How often do you guys play?
Thank you. Just once a week.
Oh, that seems like a lot. How long are your sessions?
Clem,
Is he lying?
you don't play once a week.
Our group plays once a week. I, however, am hooked and actually currently in 3 sessions that are all done in VR chats. 2 scheduled and then 1 sporadic where we will gather up and play together if everyone's on and feels like it. Yeah, no, I got a problem.
Is it all in VR?
Yeah, all in VR chat.
Oh,
Some of it gets streamed, right?
And everything. Yes, actually. 2 of our teams are streamed. If you guys ever want to look into this, it's the first few episodes are recorded first person in VR because that's just the setup we had. We now actually have recording stuff set up. But if you guys are ever curious, check it out. Go on YouTube and search up Legendary Actions. You'll know it when you see it. You'll see a golden D20 with LA on it. And me and him are currently in this team name is weird, but it's been a running joke within VR chat for a while. So we play as a traveling band in our group called Spunk Orchard, which is also the name we've used for our What's in the Box. Well, my What's in the Box team. He's Team Avian. But
Yeah, we know of you.
yeah.
Could you guys use like a trumpet player?
No.
Hey, thanks, Nomono. I appreciate
Well,
your
I
time.
mean, and I'm trying to get you in there.
I really appreciate it.
Well, we could use it. Like,
I also play trombone too, so.
Our traveling band in D&D could really use it. I mean, our mates just play spoons. God help us.
Wait, Lyko, did you have a quick comment, or were you just reacting? Oh, maybe you were just excited. Sorry.
How long is your session?
Sadly, only
How long
about
is your
2 hours.
session?
So every episode's about 2 hours.
Man, 2 hours seems
Oh no, I'm seeing some
plenty.
3
How
hours.
long would you go if there were no limits?
I'd forget to eat. Cool. The thing is,
Wow.
though, actually, yeah, our cameraman's in on the group too. He's part of Spunk Orchard. But
Plot
our
twist.
group, because the problem is, like, we got Zircron and a couple others over in the UK. So with that kind of time zone thing, is these poor bastards stay up really late just to make it to these games sometimes.
Yeah, and to make the end game.
Obsession.
Dedication, addiction, potato.
Yeah.
So what's happening is, in real life, you're a human being, and you put on a headset that takes you to a virtual world where you go through a portal and step into a virtual space with a table on it, where you roll virtual dice and you have a virtual gamer card, and in your imagination, you're playing another reality on top of that, where there is an entirely separate adventure going on.
It's meta all the way down.
Wow.
So like, I don't know. There's something about that seems odd to me. Like it's too deep. I don't know.
Oh, we'll take it a step deeper. A couple of our guys on our teams at least. Well, no, even on Team B, because Team B never got a name because that's a newer one, and we haven't had a defining moment yet where our group has named itself. So it's just Team B. But actually, 1 or 2 people in Team B and a couple in Team Spunk Orchard actually have their D&D characters as avatars while we play as well.
Oh yeah, that's something totally unique to VR chat. Hi, Psych. Oh.
I've lost tracking. I don't know where I am. Thanks, Windows
You're
Virtual
playing
Reality.
Poplopo right now.
I literally, I don't even.
Oh, he's over here for
okay.
me.
Oh,
He's
it's back.
fine.
Nope, it's not.
Oh, you're
man.
standing in the
Well,
wall.
I'm just gonna try to,
Scoot forward a little, man.
regain tracking.
So if you're
Oh,
playing
there it is.
D&D in
Okay.
real life,
Oh, that's
like
why it was.
it's fairly common to maybe like draw your character or design it right, and you could even wear a costume in theory. But when you're doing it here, like you create you could potentially create an avatar and actually embody the character that you're playing in the game.
Yeah.
Wait, have you
One
guys
guy on our team is
done that?
Yeah, we got a couple, and we have one guy going so far as to commission a custom avatar that's based around his character completely. AKA your cameraman's doing that.
We can.
How many people
So
are in
that-
this group? Oh, sorry.
Makes sense.
Was it about 9, I believe?
9?
Whoa, that's
No,
a big
10 if
game.
you include the DM.
Yeah, 10 if you include the DM.
I think that getting the avatar commissioned is a great idea because it like people get art commissioned of their characters, like their original characters for role playing or fiction all the time. But you can't do much with just a picture. You can display it somewhere. But if you get an avatar commissioned, you know, you can wear it and you can do more with it. I like that idea a lot.
It must help the
Yeah.
transition too for when you're stepping into character and like having there be a difference between like Zircron and whatever character you're playing. Like you're actually a different body.
Yeah, I play an Orc, which are just anthropomorphic bird people.
But you just play bird people.
What else did
Why
you
not?
expect from him, man?
I guess you can do anything you want.
Hey, big bird. Hey, we have a
Bird.
bird person. Just to say, we have a bird person here. You know.
Oh yeah, there's Big
Bird
Bird over
person?
there.
Yep.
Oh, you're dressed up
a
fancy.
big bird, so to speak.
Oh,
Wait a second.
Should we so like let's move on from there, right? So like you guys are simulating this tabletop game, but you're doing so with this new technology, and it feels to me like there's this next step. And so let's bring the last member of your group up here. Zarni, can you run up here?
I would like to cast Summon Cat.
Summon Cat.
Kitty, 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 kitty.
So
Summon
Zarni,
Cat. Summon Cat. See, just like my
There he is.
birds, you know.
oh, you guys don't get along, huh? Like cats and birds.
Oh,
I'd like to see you-
I've
I-
seen lots of YouTube
do.
videos that suggest otherwise.
I'd like to see him catch a bird of
Propaganda.
prey.
So Zarni, like, I got really excited, and we talked for a while. This was like months ago when I was first in VR chat about like what the new possibilities of role playing are going to be. Like, I sort of didn't imagine that there would be this recreation of the desktop. Like, I just assumed we would sort of take it one step further. Like, what did you sort of what have you pictured for like the future of role playing here in VR?
I was thinking like what people already do in live action roleplay LARP, but you know in VR, because that to me it seems so fucking natural to me. In actual real life physical LARP, you know, there's still the how should I put it, like these gamified systems. Like if you're like most of you have probably seen the infamous lightning bolt
That's my only frame of reference, unfortunately.
So you know,
You have to use your
gamified system
imagination.
in LARPs, yeah, like tennis balls could be lightning bolts, but if you do it in VR, then you could have, you know, a spell selection and actually throw lightning bolts instead of tennis ball. And that
Has
to
this
me is,
happened? Sorry.
if this has happened, probably, but I haven't been part of it, sadly. Not yet.
I mean, I guess Orbus VR is like the closest thing to that, because you can be a
Yeah, I
V-mage
would-
and
I would guess you would do that sort of thing in an MMO most easily, but I didn't encounter anyone role playing when I went into Orbis.
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess it depends on your definition. That's the question. Is that like in Orbis, like if people are literally drawing spells to cast a spell, and then there's this little community area where someone is trying to teach other people how to draw a spell and cast a spell because it's skill based, like with your controller. I mean, is that role playing, or is it just me
mean,
legitimately as a person like wanting to learn how to cast a spell, and I'm not actually assuming another character? I just want to learn how to cast a spell.
Right.
kind
If
of thing.
it's, I mean, it could easily just be you in the context of the game, learning how to play the game rather than learning how to cast
Yeah.
a spell. It's kind of that distinction about where you're putting your attention and what kind of arrangement you have with the people you're
But-
playing with.
I mean, I felt like I was trying to cast it, like I legitimately was trying to like learn how to cast the spell. So I guess the question also is like, does role playing it require you to actually have to assume a self that is different from you? Like, do I have to actually assume a self that's different than me, or when I'm in Orbis, is it if I'm like a mage trying to learn how to cast a spell, then is that just like kind of a continuation of my real self or something?
I think it is less about the character you play than it is about the fiction you're inhabiting. Because I think Zircron mentioned earlier, like you can just be yourself and kind of just make the decisions that you would make, but you're making them in a fictional setting. So it's possible that Orbis kind of blurs the line there, because you can totally be yourself, but you are having to, in the fiction of the game, magic is enabled through these particular gestures, and so it matches both the fiction and the real life at the exact same time.
Yes,
so it's a
it seems
perfect blending.
It seems like a portal into role playing. I mean, perhaps things like MMOs are what got people in. I mean, even though D&D existed a long time before that, like maybe MMOs and assuming characters and being forced almost to engage in that way is like this crossover. I don't know.
Yeah.
Zarni,
I
why
think-
is Orbis not good enough? What were you
I
gonna say?
haven't. I was gonna say. What was I gonna say? I think the difference between. Oh shit! I'm losing tracking. Hold on. I gotta reposition myself.
Yeah, don't get getting too close to the
physically.
wall. I think there's a glitch or something. That's what was happening to me.
Sorry, I lost track of myself a little bit. Yeah, I think the difference between, doing practicing all these spells in Orbus versus if you were doing like a VR LARP and doing the exact same thing is when you're just playing Orbus, as a game, you're going through all the same motions that you probably would do in a LARP. And what really differs is you're using, like if you're LARPing role playing, then the game mechanics are there to enhance your experience. But if you're just playing Orbus just as a game, you're not role-playing, the game mechanics are there to just enhance your game experience, not to enhance your immersion.
That's an interesting distinction.
You're sort of at the limitation of what the programmers have become the dungeon master, and they've set all the rules in stone, and now there's no flexibility. Like the thing that
the game itself is the universe itself, the atoms that make up the entire world. You just have to play around them.
But then you're so limited, right? Like we're always on the same side fighting monsters. Like I want to encounter other characters, right? Like I want to encounter you and have like maybe an oppositional relationship where it's not just like we're all sort of the same and we're fighting mushrooms or whatever the fuck you fight in Orbis. I don't know.
You probably fight mushrooms.
You
at
never
some
got
point.
past those mushrooms, did you?
Wait, Zircon,
yeah,
sorry,
so
did I interrupt you?
No, I think Zarni just made like an excellent point, and that's sort of like the key difference. Like, because I've been playing RuneScape for like yonks now. Like, I have a very deep understanding of like the lore and the mechanics and like every spot in the game, but I've never once role played in this MMORPG. And that's because the mechanics.
But you could, right? And if you were to roleplay, then you would do, the exact same things that you do when you're just playing the game, essentially. But you do the exact same thing, but for two different reasons, like two different outcomes for you personally.
Yeah, I mainly play for like gaining progress and experience, and for me that's how I enjoy the game, just like seeing numbers go up and making progress. And if I'm doing that, I don't really have time to really like do the roleplay sort of stuff. I can't just like go over to the store and then sell my items and then just like do the slow paced role playing stuff, because that's not really efficient. But here in VR, I could easily like roleplay and stuff because there are no incentives. What I'm doing is just for fun.
That's interesting because I played RuneScape. I have like 8,000 hours total logged into RuneScape from my teenage years or whatever. So, but I remember there were people. Yeah, I was definitely addicted to it. But just in case anyone's wondering, that's like actually a full-time job for like 5 years, like 40 hours a week. But anyway, but I remember that RuneScape, there were a lot of people who did role play in RuneScape and like kind of like did those kinds of things and pretending to
World
be
42 at Falador. Who knows what happened in his bedrooms?
Falador came to mind when you talked about role playing actually. But it's interesting because somehow with VR, it's like almost as if technology facilitates easier forms of communication, that somehow the closer that the virtual, which is like fantasy, gets, because RuneScape is pretty divided. You can only text chat. You can't really talk in real time. There's no body language. It's very, very divided. But as technology facilitates easier ways to communicate and interact interpersonally, all of a sudden slipping into a different character. And I think of Owlboy's, like Owlboy was talking on our Discord about the Great Pug and how easy it is to slip into those things. So that's something that I feel like is like as and Zarni, you've had experience there too.
Yeah, so would you say that your experience is like similar to like mine or Psych's?
I was sort of half asleep there one, as in how?
Have you ever roleplayed in RuneScape before?
In RuneScape particular, no, but like Poplopo said, she did. I roleplayed in World of Warcraft before.
So what made the distinction, like, what was different between the two?
like doing LARP and role-playing in World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh.
obviously you have to.
Or
it's
RuneScape
more or
in
less
World of
just
Warcraft.
RuneScape. I don't know RuneScape particularly because, like I said, I haven't done it in RuneScape, so I can't really answer that.
So I actually we've kind of mentioned before, which is that I don't see a lot of role playing happening in VR. Like, I'm not seeing it in Orbis. I'm not seeing it in VR chat very much. And maybe that's just because people are kind of more like privately doing it. But I was
Yeah,
kind of,
I'd
you
imagine.
mentioned the fact, you mentioned the fact though that VR is it's so easy to communicate in VR. And my hypothesis is that as actually why role playing isn't as common yet, is because it's too embodied and it's too immediate, and there's not as easily, because you don't see a lot of role playing in real life either. Like, there is LARPing, but it's very few and far between. Like, you don't see that a whole lot, and I think there's a difficulty there. There's like an intimacy to having that experience.
It's definitely not made in public.
Yeah.
But people
But what about the Great
role
Pug?
play.
Well, but like, that's such a easy, like, well, that's easy because the like, it's a kind of a real life scenario, I think, kind of. Like, everybody knows how to behave at a bar. Everyone knows how to, be a bartender or whatever. But like, if you go into a fantasy world and like someone comes up to you and like, starts talking in a weird accent and starts talking about their guild is their, I don't know, their king is missing and they have to go rescue someone, or or like there's a dragon or something, like, you wouldn't know how to respond immediately because there's no easy context to go off of, and it's so immediate, it's so in your face that like they're right there in front of you like a real person.
So I'm hearing that there's a difference between, and I guess VR is the only thing that like allows for this, but that because it's a virtual bar, we're all of a sudden labeling role-playing as acting like you're in a real bar. Even though in real life, the only types of role-playing that exist are these fantasy type like role plays. So it sounds like, but I've been considering VR as like when it's really immersive and really realistic, like the Great Pug, which feels like a real bar. Role playing occurs when people actually act like a bartender and you act like a patron. You're like, oh, I want a beer, and then you have this whole interaction and someone's cleaning their glass and things like that. But I guess you're referring to more role playing as like this abstracted kind of fantasy.
Well, there has been, I mean, discussion about whether that is actually role playing, because it's, I mean, you're performing an action to kind of give life to a scenario, but like there's no real fictional world there, or if there is, it's kind of small. Like the pug is its own like self-contained like fiction, and you're not playing a character. So I think there's a gray area there about what is role playing and what's not. But there's only so far you can take it too. Like I'll role play being a bartender at the Great Pug, but then like that's as far as I can go. What else can you do with that?
There's no bigger context where the world starts to end and you guys actually exit the bar and the adventure continues outside and anything could happen, because we just don't have the technology to. Somebody would have to create all that content ahead of time. So you're sort of saying it's easier when it's like abstracted. Like if I'm playing at a table, like I'm a little bit freer to role play because like I'm not actually embodying it.
Yeah, and in text, like that's why text is such a ready environment for role playing, is because you don't have any, like, you've got a lot of descriptive freedom, but there's the distance between the screen of yourself and the screen of the person you're interacting with. And like even in Second Life, you've got avatars there for visual like reference, but you're still communicating over text for the most part when you role play.
That kind of brings up a question
time delay
for me.
Yeah, what's that?
So what makes role playing good then? Like, is it the theme of the role play, or like what makes a good role play basically?
I think that's so subjective.
It's per user, really.
Yeah,
That's
like some people really want a good world and they want good world building. And I encountered a group when I was doing some research for this episode that they come up with countries, and they role play as countries and like as groups of people and as like political leaders, and they role play and they role play their countries with each other. which so like maybe they're into that. And no, it's called nation states. And so there's that, and then so someone might want world building, but other people engage in role playing for the personal interactions where they're role playing out a relationship with someone else. And so that's like, it's going to depend on your tastes. And I see that Mystical Cyan has a comment here.
Yes.
Do you have a comment or a question?
Center. Yeah.
Well, it was mainly a comment around what you guys are talking about with how like role play's been kind of evolving and changing and stuff.
Wait,
And I wanted to mention
Yeah. Will you? Yeah.
Oh, I think you can see us though. They can't see us.
No, I can see it. It's just I just like pressing the space key. But it's like when you guys are talking about with role play evolving and such, and it's actually like it kind of makes like a good point, because I've noticed that a lot of like people who jump into VR chat, they just kind of jump into it, and they don't really think about it, but they kind of instinctively start role playing in a way. They just get kind of immersed in the whole environment, and they start doing whatever they kind of want to do as a persona. Because I've seen so many people in like the pug and such, like people like role playing as a bartender, like you said, like people go into the pug and then people are just role playing like, hey, give me a drink, I want a drink, or something like that. Or other people are like, say me, like the hoppos and stuff, we all like to just kind of role play as the hoppo and kind of run around and stare at people and stuff and just play around. And then we got like other people who just kind of, I imagine the real Big Bird though, I mean, I think it's just people play as their personas.
Do you role play that character, Big Bird? It's in your name.
I sure do.
Oh, okay.
No, that's
like,
Miles.
You met somebody earlier who was Marge Simpson, right?
Yeah, you were talking to Marge.
Yeah, and that was an interesting experience, because like that's that context thing that I have difficulty with. Like I'm not in any sort of character except for Poplopo, and that's like pretty broad. And so if someone comes up to me and starts playing a fictional character, like I don't know how to respond to them. I don't know if I should respond as if I'm in the Simpsons universe, or should I respond as if I'm myself, or because like she was making references to her husband, and am I supposed to pretend along with her that this fictional scenario exists? So the etiquette is also difficult too in VR, because like people get into it.
I think that I think that also applies to your user suggestive thing that you mentioned earlier. Like it just depends on who it is that is responding. Because, like, if you want to roleplay in the Simpsons universe, you would start roleplaying in the Simpsons universe. But if you just want to, like, chat with them, you would just respond normally.
Yeah, but
what's interesting, I think...
Oh, no, go ahead, Mystical.
What I find really interesting as well, especially in regards to the VR chat, though, is that, people play just video games and they have their username, and they're like, say, I'm Mystical Cyan, and there's ZircronSwift, and then there's Kerator or whatever, and they're just playing video games and stuff. But when you jump into VR chat and you're communicating with people and you're interacting with them, and you're kind of making it feel extremely immersive in a way, but it's like you're role playing as yourself, your own persona. You're role playing as yourself, because I imagine a lot of people here don't like kind of jump in and they just start playing around and they just start pretending and stuff, and they just start doing all a bunch of silly stuff. Not stuff that you would do as yourself per se, but you do it as people know you as you in this game.
Yeah, there's a context.
I feel like that kind of
there's a context to your personality. Like I behave differently in VR chat than I behave in real life.
So you want a you want a bigger context. You want to understand what the rules are in the bigger picture. So you understand what your role is when you're speaking to Marge. And I kind of want to talk about how we're going to move in that direction, because that was like the hurdle, Zarni, that I hit with, like, if we're going to do LARPing or do something in here, like how do we create that greater context? But also, like, it's hard to move from desktop to LARPing in VR in my mind, because like I don't know how to replace the die rolls and create the context of the game and have it be sort of free and open, but not just on our imaginations, right? Free and open, but also we can share like an actual location. Like, have you found a way to get around that, or do you know where we're going to go?
I mean, like what I'm thinking is just use the actual rules they use in LARPing, and then enhance them with the digital freedom that we have in VR. because obviously LARPing in real life, you're constricted to the laws, the physical laws, and you know you don't want to actually hurt anyone. But in VR, I can be as virtually violent as I want.
So
I can,
how
you know,
is
really.
this? How is it managed in VR or in LARPing? I mean, is there a game master? Is there a predefined game? Like, is there?
It really depends on the LARP itself. Like in America, I believe there are actually, you know, actual game masters that walk around and, you know, help to guide things along. But on the LARPs that I've been to, there isn't any, you know, one single game master. Everyone is sort of, you know, their character, and everyone has agreed on the rules in beforehand, and everyone is, you know, supposed to play along because the objective isn't to win or, you know, for your faction to be successful. It's just to have fun, basically.
So how do you determine what the story is going to be?
Usually, in the LARPs that I've been to, there is a backstory to the scenario that is going to be played out. Like there is maybe, you know, a couple of pages, so you can read through that, and then you have your own faction. And of course, your own faction has their own little bit of backstory, and then with the people in charge of creating the LARP, obviously you're gonna have to, you know, talk with them, and maybe have some things that you get to know in advance. Like, yeah, our goal is supposed to steal the weapons cache from the store, and there isn't any game masters running around, but it's obviously your people in charge of the event, so they know that, and then maybe they talk with the group in charge of the actual store, and they don't outright tell them, hey, you're gonna get robbed at some point, and that's this other group's, you know, made point that they're supposed to rob this store. That's their goal for this LARP. But maybe they'll set up such a scenario that, yeah, and maybe like they're supposed to go out and meet with some group of travelers, like merchants, and whenever that happens, that's the cue for the other group that's supposed to steal the weapons cache from the store to, you know, sneak in and try to, you know, steal the weapons, and then it's up to the actual players themselves to determine how that goes. Do they get caught, and if so, does a battle break out? Do they succeed? Do they get away?
So there's a context and there's a story built up from this kind of predetermined backstory, narrative, and characters, and then from that the story kind of arises on its own.
Yeah, like the backstory is determined, it's set in stone, and then from where the backstory ends, that's where you hop in, and then everyone as a whole decides however that goes, because you're not obviously not 100% in charge of what your future is going to be. I mean, I might be on the way to my camp, and then some random decides to rob me, and, you know, things get a little bit ugly, and then my character dies, and then I have to make a new one. Some
I get a little bit
doesn't allow for, you know, character killing, so it's very individual. There's no correct rules when it comes to LARPing. It's all, you know, depending on how the people in charge want to play it.
I get frustrated by those limitations. Like, I want anything to be possible, right? Like, where I don't know. We'll get there in a second. And actually, before I get to Stokel, can we go back to Mystical really quick, because like you're sort of also going in this direction, right? So can we talk a little bit about how you
exclamation marks as well?
Okay, but first I just want to hear from Cyan, because so you have a bit of a plan to address this, right? Like, so what are you going to do with your? Is it called VR Chat Improv Adventures?
Yes, it's a project that I've been working. So basically, the idea that I had a lot was actually from the VR Chat event community, was how you guys kind of popped on stage and you started improvising as yourselves, as well as the sort of comment I had where people kind of play as their own personas. The project kind of started off with my group with Nags. I hang out with like a bunch of content creators and stuff, and I talked to them a bunch, and I was just like, the idea I had was to build a game sort of that happens like once or twice like a month, and it's kind of like a D&D sort of S-style game, following along like a small group of main characters, but it has people like actors and such that play on the side as well as play the game themselves. So everyone's like actually playing the center around like a main storyline where everyone's playing as their own persona. So it's not like the Big Bird comes in and he's like playing as some like knight or whatever. No, he's playing as Big Bird. He's playing as the real Big Bird. That's him. So everyone will be playing as themselves in this whole thing, and they're going to be improvising it. And there's like, it's supposed to be centered around a storyline, and just the idea was to basically get as many people as possible and get everyone involved and try to get everyone in something at one. Sorry, and try to get everybody in on this, and just the whole idea was just to build like a community event thing, basically, a big old like D&D game. Because I noticed everyone just loves role playing and just getting into
like
stuff.
An intriguing idea.
How are you going to create the bigger context? Is it similar to the LARPing stuff where you sort of prepare a background ahead of time, or how will that work?
Yeah. We're trying to get a system set up for it because we just got like so many people on board already, and we're trying to get a system in place. The idea is we choose a world, and that is a chapter. So each world is a chapter, and we fill it. Well, we have the main character group come in, but the main character group, the only thing, they're the main focal point, obviously, but they're not like the main focal point. So everything around in the whole like chapter is still alive. And we have actors which are playing as themselves, and the actors have like a small little like script of basically, hey, like these are kind of like your objectives that you want to do during this chapter, try to complete, and everything else is improv. So basically, everything's reactionary. So everything is entirely improv of them playing as themselves in this universe, and it's just meant to be kind of like a D&D-esque game, and we have people who are going to be playing as like a narrator who kind of flies around. Follow around, and they kind of give the finer details and stuff. We have camera guys who kind of spectate and they kind of like guide people along in case things don't go right. And once the main character group finishes their main objective and everyone else is kind of finalized, and then we move on to the next main chapter with the main character. And then we bring all the other actors and other actors from before the other chapters could come in, and like we're trying to build like a whole storyline of where the main characters go on this whole adventure, and they interact with all these other groups of people who are also interacting with each other. And the idea behind it as well is that when I said like the world, try to make the world alive and stuff, is like the main characters come in and they interact with people, and there could be like a quest going on, and he has to go like talk to some dude in the front, like all the way like on the other side of the map. But then we have another group of people who are supposed to take out that guy. So if he's too late, then the guy could be wiped out, or if he's like early, he gets ambushed and stuff.
Into your mic.
Mike, ignore them.
Yeah, it's just kind of like building upon people who improv, people kind of like doing their own thing, but also trying to tie in a story with it and try to just make like a whole like adventure that people can be a part of, like a whole grand scheme and stuff. We got like people writing up in the stories and.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. I think that's we talked about like the therapeutic. I'm also interested in the therapeutic applications of VR chat, and I think that these kinds of adventures and like group experiences can be really, really like going on an adventure and having a whole activity and things like that to do. I think people will emerge from that with really positive emotions, and it could be a very positive and powerful like influence in people's lives.
Yeah, it sounds like a ton of fun.
It's people to like interact with each other.
That sounds really great. Hey, if people want to get involved in that, what should they do?
There's a document I have set up for people to just sign up. Currently, I'm getting like the whole Discord set up, and like the Discord's going to have like a spoiler-free channel and like a spoiler channel. But basically, if people want, like the Discord's going to be public, and so it's just people could just join off of it when it's made. But there's a document that I have where people put up their Discord number and whatever, and once I get the Discord set up, I just DM them immediately saying, "Hey, Discord's up."
So should they talk to you personally in game if they want to get on there?
Oh no, they don't have to talk to me personally again. You can just throw your name down and it's all good. Because
yeah, but how do we know where the document is?
I'm assuming everyone here is like in the ENDGAME Discord, right? Like pretty much roughly everyone.
Don't make an assumption.
Yeah, so Yeah, if you post it in the Endgame, so if people want to join the Endgame Discord, you can go to endgamevr.com and hit the link. And then Mystical, if you post this link or any information, we have a role-playing, we basically have a channel devoted to this episode. So it's like role-playing and storytelling. So if you post in that, then you'll be able to share it there. And then people, anyone who's interested can kind of get through that that way. And yeah, this sounds really cool. I mean, I'm very interested in it. I feel like a lot of people
What
will
I think
be, so
the best part about it as
cool.
well is that because I've been hitting up so many different communities who like they don't know each other, like they've been all their own tight little communities, but they're filled with like amazing people. Like there's you guys, there's like Nag's group, there's like Ikrim's group, there's like Spaz's group. There's so many different groups of people, and it's just like everyone kind of like interacts with themselves, but they're like, oh yeah, I've heard of these people, but I never really met them. So like the idea to get the whole community involved in one big old project of everyone just interacting and meeting with each other and just tying everything together, I felt was just like the best.
That sounds like a
I
great
really
idea.
want to see that come to fruition. That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I'm really
Actually,
interested to see. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go on because I'm gonna ramble a bit.
I'm just curious how the system is going to work and where it's going to go, because it seems so obvious to me that this is the future. Like that, we're going to move away from passive storytelling where we're just watching television and into interactive storytelling, because like you mentioned, it's more therapeutic. It's going to be more absorbing.
Yeah.
I think it's more fulfilling for all of us, and like it keeps us active. So I know that's where we're going, but I don't know how we're going to get there yet. Like it's hard for me to imagine what the systems in place are going to be. So I'm just really curious what people are going to try. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I'm going to check it out.
Yeah.
Cool.
And like the way that like Mystical is like just talking about it, it reminds me of like just like how I've just been like playing around with my avatars and just like using that as like a different persona to escape the real world, and in a sense role playing that character. So like you just like remembered me when I had feathered wings, but then what the events that happened within like this metaverse made me lose my wings, and I had like mechanical wings because I tried to help Koro get the Valiant out of the VRPD compound and got attacked by zombies.
I saw that.
Yeah, and then this happened where still working out details, but I like to think that Poplopo, I didn't really think about this, but it just makes so much sense that like the last What's in the Box where like there were those hearts and those chocolates, and for the picture I wanted you to like punch my heart out of my chest.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking like it would just be make so much sense that like you literally killed me, and then I resurrected as like some sort of demonic creature in hell.
Oh my goodness. Cool, I'll take it.
That's the metal.
And that's just another evolution, another step forward of what this character is as I develop these avatars. Because when I make a new avatar, I keep the avatar that I use. So that's just like an evolution of this character's story. So therefore, I've just like been doing a year-long role play essentially.
I hope someday you can sort of line them up on a shelf so we could like see the progression.
Also,
of
IK
what
sort of stuck for me.
Oh.
Yeah, you're.
Suddenly
we skipped a couple of questions. Are you finding them?
Yeah, Stokel. Yeah. I know Stokel was.
Universe.
Hey, sir.
Okay, it's a bit late, but the thing I was gonna bring up is when you guys were talking about D&D was you can play Tabletop Simulator in VR, and there are very interesting prospects for that. Is if they could expand the VR version of that to make it so maybe like if you could inhabit your game piece and control your game piece, so like you could move your piece in VR, so it'd be like the third person view or overhead view, move your character, and when a situation happens, you control your character to do different movements in game.
Jumping in and out of character physically. I love that idea.
So that makes a lot of sense. So you might be in a tabletop, similar to the way you guys play it. You might simulate a tabletop, move stuff around, but then when something interesting happens, you zoom in on the location and you actually become the character and do it first person.
Yeah, there's a very big opportunity in if somebody could expand that range of role playing for D&D, and it can be more than just D&D. You can even set it to just basic worlds and stuff like that. So, like your favorite movie, you can make your favorite. You can jump into the main character of your favorite movie and act it out as if you're the main character of the movie. So eventually, it can come to that point.
Yeah, that sounds like that's going to be the future of entertainment. And also, it's also
try that soon. I like that.
It's also this whole idea of wanting to involve people in their own experiences. Like Facebook and all these other media companies are always trying to elicit emotional reactions and have people relate to brands and products and all those kinds of things. So as much as I hate corporate, I don't know, kind of corporate America or whatever, like they're going to definitely latch onto this as a way. Actually, just at a conference recently, there's a pharmaceutical, like basically pharmaceutical companies now are using virtual reality to try to sell drugs to doctors. They're trying to put doctors into VR experiences and have them experience the way that the drug is going to change a person so that they can remember it more effectively and then prescribe it to their. It's really messed up, but that's kind of like
advertising scheme.
Right, but this is but I think this role playing and participating in the creation and influencing others, I think that's going to be a big part. This kind of media, this change in media is going to be.
You're making me realize that like storytelling is so powerful, right? Like it really can change our minds about things in a very deep way. And you could easily imagine Zuckerberg or somebody putting together a system that draws you in, that like you immerse yourself in a character and takes you through a story, giving you a bunch of like deep symbols and experiences, and you come out the other end like with like basically having learned a moral or a lesson, but it's something that's like more clicks on Facebook, or it's like like yes, bow down to your corporate overlord, like teaching you like through the experience like what a good little human is.
I don't know. I think as with a lot of things, including Facebook and Twitter, the biggest power in it is going to be user created content. Like that's where Facebook's power is, and that's where Twitter's power is. That's where like every major platform is all about user created content. And I would bet that something like role playing and something like collaborative storytelling would manifest in the same way.
And I think that's a really good point, and I think that's why, to me, that's why I'm so grateful for VR Chat and its dev team, because they're facilitating user-created content, and they're not doing the equivalent of a news feed that's sorted by some proprietary algorithm that you don't even know. Like it's free for the community to be driving the content, and I think that the more the existence of this space, and I think my worst nightmare honestly is VR Chat being acquired by Facebook or something like that, is that if something like that happened, all of a sudden that power and control of social interaction would be lying within a company that's trying to monetize it, as opposed to a more like Second Life type model where people are creating content and consuming it, and it's more of a kind of free society where we can develop these relationships and
imagine like imagine the AI is it's listening to what you're saying, Clem, and it sees that like he's a little bit anti-corporate, like he's not willing to bow down, and so on my friends list it just suddenly pushes him towards the back. He's a less important friend. You don't need to see him very often, right? And the people with those dangerous ideas, they suddenly get shoved aside.
I'm ignored by my friends. I was like, oh, it's the robots that are making them ignore me, not the fact that I'm toxic.
Well, Clem certainly has ideas.
Oh man.
But let's keep going, because we've been going about an hour, but there were still some more questions and comments. So, facts.
Yeah, so I'm going to throw some deep thoughts in here, but when does role-playing go too far?
That's a good one.
Expand on that.
I've heard stories about role-playing go that far that it actually affects your real-life psychology as well, where it actually changes your real-life persona, but not only your virtual persona or your fictional persona. So when
you guys definitely feel like you're definitely affected by the characters you play. Like, do you feel like you're in some danger of losing yourself to them, or?
Well, not in particular. I normally feel quite. I can normally hop in and out because I don't have as much exposure to those D&D characters. But in VR Chat, I basically have my whole social life here, and that has gotten to the point where I just refer to myself as Zircron instead of my flesh name.
Flesh name. I've known you for a long time. I don't know what your name is. That's crazy.
My role-playing, like inhabiting a role-playing character in a fictional space has taught me lots of things about myself. Like when you take on, whenever you write or whether you take on fiction and explore different possibilities of how to express yourself, like you'll always find things out about yourself. You'll always learn more. Like it can be a very insightful activity.
But if it has the power to do that, like it seems like there's got to be the other side of it, like maybe somehow traumatizing you or like exposing you to something that does change your personality in a negative way. Like that seems possible, right?
That can. I mean, horror. Anything horror.
Probably, yeah, it can also probably get to the point where you're getting so.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Any sort of fiction can really do that, so it's not a particular danger with role-playing so much as just exposure to new experiences in general.
Yeah, but when you're playing, you're putting yourself into that. When you're reading a book, you're just like a spectator looking how the events are going. Same with a film. So video games are a sort of sense because you sort of have some form of agency. But when you're role playing, you have a greater deal of immersion because what you do affects the world more than pre-programmed software.
I'd like to say something real quick.
Yeah.
Okay.
It might make some people mad, but for a while there, I did the Uganda Knuckles thing quite often, and it actually spilled over into my real life for a little bit.
A lot of
The
people
Uganda
start VR
Knuckles,
chat like this.
the accent.
Yeah, it drew people in. We can't argue that.
The accent.
Yeah, exactly.
That I used as the joke actually spilled over into my real life. So like, I actually started speaking with it a little bit in real life, and then I'm like, okay, I have to stop this, and then no longer do it because I was like, it's too much. It was like every other day I went to just joke, mess around and stuff like that. But then it literally did things do carry over sometimes. And I noticed myself, I still, when I said, do you know the way? I sometimes accidentally say, do you know the way? And it carries over.
How often do you say, do you know the way?
Let us be listen, don't do memes. Stay in school.
I'm glad you found the way out.
Yeah, you did find
That's gonna be with you for the rest of your life.
Wait, Mystical, can you step forward? I couldn't hear you.
Talking about that memes and how it's been affecting people. So you guys know the Black Panther movie? Like it's still in theaters and stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you know how they air the trailer Ready Player One before the thing. When I was watching I was in the theater, it was like packed full of people. I remember hearing after he said we must save Utopia or whatever. A bunch of people started screaming, "We must save VR chat from the memes," and I was just like, "Are you kidding?"
Wow.
And then when Black Panther said I know it surprised me. And then when I heard Black Panther go, "I never freeze," the amount of giggling, I knew because other people were like confused about why they giggled, but I knew people were in this.
I had two people in the back of the movie theater yell Uganda every time they said the country's name for the first like 5 minutes.
or something like that.
Yeah, they kept
They
saying
also said the
Uganda
way.
instead.
There was also a lot of times they said the way in the movie,
man.
and then yeah,
Memes are
It's
so.
something new.
They're such a
It's a
disease.
conspiracy. They made the film and then implanted the meme for advertising.
oh man.
I'm gonna step back to.
Okay, let's get back on track.
Yes, as he.
I was going to add one more thing about the dangers of role playing. Like, have you guys something that I've witnessed before? And it wasn't necessarily role playing. We were playing like a board game, but the stakes were high, and there's real competition, and you might have to lie or you might have to trick somebody, and you might
Catan.
It wasn't Catan, but you might demolish someone in game. And that could actually affect your relationship in real life, right? Like you could betray someone, stab them in the back, and then they actually do hate you outside of the game.
I guess that sort of thing has happened to me before.
That happened in a game, in a D&D game I played in Meat Space, where we had the deck of many things, and one character decided that he wanted to keep drawing from the deck of many things.
For some slight reference, you might want to let some of the people know of what the deck of many things, because otherwise you just kind of...
Okay. The deck of many things is a magical deck of 21 cards, was it? No, 23 cards. And you can draw any number of cards that you want. And depending on what card you get a good thing or a bad thing.
He's slowly sinking.
So you could draw from the deck of many things and you could get 50,000 gold. Or you could lose up to 4 intelligence points on your modifier. Or you could get an extra level if you defeat your encounter unharmed. Or you could die. And one of the cards that this character drew was the Skulls one, where he summons the Avatar of Death, and you have to have a one-on-one fight with this Avatar of Death. And this Avatar of Death rolled really well on all of his attack rolls and killed this character's avatar. And when you die from the Avatar of Death, you cannot be resurrected by any means. After that game, we didn't see him again in any future games.
Oh.
Which is weird because he was using a randomly made character, so his main character was still alive, and he was aggressively drawing from the deck of many things. Like when you're doing that, bad things are going to happen.
Well, that makes sense because it happens in video games too. If you die in a video game, something bad happens, you get so angry, you throw your controller, and you rage quit for a while. I mean, it happens.
Sorry, there was somebody up there that was about to say something, and
Lyco.
Oh, hey, what's up? Oh, you might be muted.
You're mute.
Oh, come on, man. I thought I heard you earlier.
He did, yeah.
We heard you in the other room.
Your microphone's dead.
Yeah, we heard him here. So.
I'm pretty sure you're all hallucinating. I've never heard him speak.
No, we did.
He did earlier, yeah.
Before, yeah.
You're still muted. We can't hear you.
Is dead.
Heard him and some echo.
It's like if you all
read it out.
If you're able to get it work, start making a lot of noise. Okay, we should head into the ending here. Is there anyone else who wants to share any final thoughts about role-playing, how it's affected them? Yeah.
I have a thought, just because like this is something that I've been in the back of my mind the whole time we've been talking about this. Is like, I think it's interesting because role-playing, we talk about we're being someone else, and I guess this is up for debate. But I would argue that even when we're being someone else, it's still our neurons, it's still our experience that's being affected and changed. And I think that role-playing is this untapped, or like people are starting to tap more and more, or they have tapped into it, way to affect ourselves. And we are assuming new possibilities of who we can be and exploring. And the transgender episode came to mind of when people, are female avatars for the first time, and then if they don't talk, people assume that they're female, and then the person who for 10 years had been uncertain and had, once they looked in the mirror and were role-playing a female avatar, all of a sudden it became confirmed that that was who they were. So the role-playing, I think, is a playful exploration of ourselves and who we can be. And I think that even though we think of it as being someone else, I think it's actually having a lot of effects on our inner psyche and I don't know, just kind of can positively influence who we are. So
Verana's not here, but they were talking. Remember when we did the Persona episode? Like, we're talking about like masks that you wear, right? And like you sort of experiment with these different, real life personas, and it can actually that's how you build up your personality.
Yeah.
Dax, were you gonna?
Yeah, I have a story.
Yeah, well, I got Lyco's question. How does one make role-playing more appealing? Or appear more appealing to other people? Because
why is it unappealing?
Doesn't have anyone.
Because for one, it's for me.
According to Lyco, according to Lyco, it's called a nerd thing. So there's people that don't want to do it because it's a nerd thing. Yeah.
VR is nerdy at this point.
Well, I think it's changed a little bit.
Like this.
We're all nerds here.
Think of it like this: you don't exactly have to call it roleplay. I mean, we have people come in. We have people come in before, and they just kind of do their own thing as well, but they're technically role playing. We have people making avatars and stuff, and they're playing. I mean, you said before as well, Poplopo, that you play as Poplopo. I mean, you don't have to sort of put a word on it. where it's just role play. You just kind of like, and I think the thing about VR chat is that role playing is VR chat. It's just you're playing the game.
Movie quotes.
I think there's something to that.
There is probably a stigma on it a little bit, but I think the stigma is mostly like it's mostly fluff. Like I mean, if you know that you like role playing, then you're going to, I don't know, find other people who do it, and like with any other nerdy activity, like it's, I don't know.
I think it takes a certain personality to even enjoy role playing, and people who are from the get-go not really into role playing, chances are, in my opinion, they're never gonna be into it, regardless on how much you try to change or bend it. Seem it's more glamorous than it actually is, stuff like that.
I feel like a lot of that though is the stigma. It's like people don't quite know what it is. I think like Stranger Things season 1 had an effect because like it showed people sort of the exciting aspect of it. And I remember Freaks and Geeks, they ended up doing D&D towards the end of Freaks and Geeks, and like that really excited me. Because like from the outside, like it does have this nerd, it's like labeled as this like really nerdy thing, and so I think we were slow to approach. But that's changed dramatically over the last, couple of decades when the nerds finally took over.
Yeah,
I think it's a lot to do with
cultural
just
thing.
the title, like the wording with it, honestly.
We just have to call it active narrative jazz. Are you an active narrative jazzist, or I don't know?
That's strange.
That's wonderful.
Only on the trumpet.
I want to mention something, by the way, when you guys was talking about people getting involved, and when they start getting into this sort of stuff and they start learning new things as well, and they start thinking about themselves, is really like what Psych said about, like you play as yourself but playing as someone else, and you learn. So I come from some communities that were actually big, like avid role players, and it was like a lot of like milsims and stuff like that. So a lot of it was people like, it was like all text-based role play in a video game. It was like Gary's Mod and whatnot. It was considered serious role play, and it was extremely staunch on like being like an actual immersive, like run-of-the-mill role play. But what I thought was interesting was when people chose their roles, say we had medics and engineers, we had people who are pilots, we had people learning their roles just to role play it better, which I thought would kind of built upon that. Because if you like role playing as something, and you start learning it, it's just kind of like, why don't you put that stuff? Because I never, actually, that actually affected my real life, because currently I'm training to be an EMT and a paramedic at the moment, and I never thought about doing that. I just wanted to join the army and just kind of do my own thing. And then I started, like while I was in high school, I started role playing, and I got into like medical role play, and I started just studying trauma care and all this other stuff, like how to like wrap bandages, what sort of chemicals you use, like how to apply an IV in the correct area for the body anatomy and everything. I was just self-learning that stuff, and it was like role play affected me, because it got me to find the one thing I want to do in my life, which is trauma care.
Oh wow.
So I thought that kind of applied.
Yeah, definitely. Wow.
I think that's a no-brainer, man. Education, like mixed in with this, so you're actively doing the things. Yeah.
And we already do that in psychology. I mean, role play on crisis hotlines. We role play in clinical psych before we start seeing patients. Like, yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, but it's Lord's before me. So.
All right, so let's have those few people that were in the circle have their final thoughts, but that'll be it. So, Lord Crit, you can go first.
I believe that roleplay is essential to the character. It is very essential. Like, man, you need to know how essential roleplay is to oneself.
Is there a monster over there?
Oh man.
Like, man, did someone say a monster? I came to say my words, not to run away.
Thanks, Shaggy.
Yeah, appreciate it. That's great.
Or Scoob.
I also give my vote to the council to hang Mystical Sion.
Are you kidding me?
Sorry.
See, just put that right there. I don't know how to. I understand what you mean about that context thing. I don't know how to respond to that at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, are we part of the
Sit
mystery
back and
team?
enjoy the show.
Are you?
I don't know.
What's going on?
Like, man,
Right, exactly.
everyone's
Like,
a
I
part
really
of the mystery team.
I appreciate
First
it,
mystery.
but I,
We must know
I
who's
don't
the
know
trap
what
in the
to-
room.
I don't know what to do.
You sound like you're high.
It's Shaggy.
Fine,
He's
just
being the
let it wash over you, Poplopo. All right, facts. Let's go. We gotta wrap it up.
Yeah, I'm just gonna throw my thing on what Lyko asked. Could you say that role playing is acting instead to make it more appealing? Because technically they are the same thing. It's just one is more nerdier and one is more socially acceptable.
Like
So it's just that label, huh? I don't know.
That's such a low priority in my mind, making
Yeah,
the
no,
image
well-
appealing. Because if you know what role playing is, you're gonna like it or you don't. And I hate catering to that friggin' the oppressive nature of people's opinions on you about whether something you like isn't cool enough. Like I don't like tolerating that even a little bit. So.
It's interesting.
That's
That's weird. You don't like being cool.
How much that actually affects
Guess
people,
not.
because I know a few people who were like absolutely despised, like, oh, I'm never going to role play, but then they come in as like their own persona in VR chat, and they just start playing as their own like selves, and then it's just kind of like, well, they just got into it somehow. I mean, you may dislike the concept of role play, but you'll get immersed, and when you start getting immersed, you want to start playing in that sort of immersion atmosphere. And that's what kind of like hooks people. Isn't really the fact that you're role playing or acting. It's just that you get immersed with something and you just want to continue on. It's like something to do.
And
My bold. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, like that's how it usually goes. People don't like something until they understand it, and then they're like, "Oh, this is cool."
My bold prediction is that within the next few decades, like this will become like active role playing will be the primary source of entertainment. Like I am certain it's going to happen, you guys. There's no question in my mind. Everyone's going to be doing it. All these people who you're thinking like are going to judge role players or whatever, they're all going to turn. They're all going to start doing it because like once they experience the active nature and actually being able to embody it, I think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Like with
It
video
is
games.
addicting.
So we're gonna-
It's wonderful.
Only
We're gonna look
nerds
back on-
play video games, but that's not the case
Yes.
anymore.
Yeah, right?
We're gonna look back on
Everyone fucking
movies.
plays.
Yeah, we're gonna
Everyone
look back
plays
on
video games
movies
these
and be
days.
like, I can't believe people passively watched these and didn't.
Yeah, but how lazy.
That's exactly what. Yeah.
The audience is so
It's gonna be
lazy.
spoon-fed
Not
a story.
engaging.
Oh my god.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't want to be part of
I
it?
can't believe people read books without experiencing them themselves.
Well,
So you
I
think
can't
about
wait
it,
for
those
the new
choose your own
Elder